Welcome to another episode of Built on Web3. Today's episode is a project deep dive where each week Thomas and I chat about a Web3 project that looks interesting to us. We're both Web3 enthusiasts just trying to learn as much as possible right alongside all of you. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the Web3 project Disco.xyz. Okay, so after all my research and prep on this, Thomas, I think I have officially been disco-pilled, as they say. I don't know about you. But I heard people use this term, so I think it's a real term that once you figure it out, you're disco pilled.
Yeah, you got reading some weird YouTube or watching some weird YouTube videos.
A deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So I'd heard of disco before and heard the founder Evan speak around the internet. But now that I've done the research into it, they're building something really, really cool, and I'm excited to talk about this. So first, what is Disco? Disco allows you to show up to any physical or digital environment and receive a personalized experience based on the parts of yourself that you wish to present. That's there's a lot of depth in there, and I'm sure we'll dig into all of that. The problem they're solving here is that I could kind of suss out is their whole thesis is that not all data is appropriate to be on chain because if it's on chain, it's public, it's permanent. Blockchains are public for the world to see forever. Disco believes that personal identifiable information doesn't belong on chain, and that this is a hugely limiting aspect of Web3. And it's kind of tough because blockchain has all these tribes. Like there's a lot of tribalism in Web3. So there's the Bitcoin maxis and there's the on-chain maxis that think everything needs to be on-chain. So how is Disco solving this issue? They've created what they call a data backpack. And in this backpack is your personal data that's private by default. And you can take this backpack to any environment and decide which parts of that data you want to show. So, and then the last piece here, and then we can get into it, is what tech is involved here. And so this is kind of where I was kind of a little bit mind blown because I hadn't even heard of some of this stuff. And it was kind of like opening up this whole new world. So on the outside, Disco uses a technology called DIDs, or Decentralized Identifiers, which is just recently recognized as a standard by W3C, who's the group that does HTTP, SMTP, all that.
The wizards.
Yes. And then inside the data backpack are things called verifiable credentials. And like I said, this is kind of where the rabbit hole opened. So let's start there. Where do you want to take this?
Well, let's start with the concept of what why this is useful, or like why the whole on-chain versus off-chain piece, and why it's important to have control over that. Because I think that's a interesting distinction that could be easily overlooked, or at least was by me when I started researching this.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like from what I can understand, why Disco has to exist is because your personal data shouldn't be on chain, because on chain is public, it's permanent, and it's immutable. So why would you want to put personally identifiable information on there? Well, and I think I agree with that.
Well, I think so. I would probably tweak that statement just a little bit. So yes, I agree, but no, do I think it's? I think what Evan and what Disco is doing is it's more so giving you the right to decide versus the other way. If it's on chain, you just have like no decision or no say in the matter of if it's going to be public or private, versus this gives you that ability to say this personally identifiable information. If I do really want public, I can have that option, but for those individuals that don't, then they can actually keep it private.
But I think there's information, like one of the biggest things that Evan says is we're humans, we're evolving. And that means the data, the personal identifiable data is also evolving. So if you put this personal identifiable data on chain, it's permanent and it's there forever and you can't change it. Yep. So what if you evolve and you need that data to evolve? You can't do that on the blockchain.
Or if you want it to change, or sorry, if you don't want it to be public anymore.
So what you said is a part of it, but but I don't think that's the main reason, right? Like, yeah, the data backpack allows you to choose public or private, but there's information that you don't want to be public in the first place that should never be public.
Things that you never want public in the first place are probably like maybe where you live, your phone number, even though the scammers still know how to get you.
But this information could be really useful in certain environments, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like you would want to bring that information some places, but you wouldn't want it just on the blockchain for the world to see.
Yep. And if you think about it right now, that's kind of what we've done by putting our data and a lot of this information even on either that's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I feel like LinkedIn is probably between Facebook and LinkedIn, they probably have the biggest trove of data because they have all this stuff. And we have privacy-ish settings that we can control, but in the early days of LinkedIn, when they were a little bit more free and open, you could see a lot more information and you didn't have control over what was actually public or not. And the funny thing is that you can actually see what was previously public too. That lives somewhere because there was some crawler that archived it and now it's out there. Trying to get that back is virtually impossible at this point.
Yeah. So the technology that they use here for keeping data in your backpack, like I said, are verifiable credentials. And this is a new thing that I didn't know this existed before. Mm-hmm. And the way I understand these are they're off-chain NFTs. They're cryptographically signed by a decentralized identifier about another decentralized identifier. It contains proof about the recipient. So, for example, Bob is a member of Dow House. That could be a verifiable credential. Or Bob's diploma from Yale University. That could be a verifiable credential. And basically, the university signs this credential as the university about the identifier Bob.
Is the university the DID there, the decentralized identifier?
No. So the DID is just an identifier. So it's a string of text. So it's basically your Ethereum address with a few characters in front of it. It's DID : and then there's like a schema that they use for the identifier.
What I had written down for what a decentralized identifier was is it's an alias for an existing address, whether that's like a Bitcoin, email, Ethereum address,
anything
that can prove ownership over other identifiers. And this other identifier is that VC, that verifiable credential. Is that right or no?
No. So I think it's the email or the Ethereum address. So that it just proves that you're the owner of that address.
So if my email is thomas@gmail.com, I can have the alias, this DID, that is, grass mower.
It's DID : email : thomas@gmail.com.
Gotcha.
Or whatever it is.
And that other piece and then you're proving that you have ownership over this Thomas without actually revealing that you're Thomas, I guess.
And so you have this, so you have this DID, it'll be decentralized identifier. So like right in the Web3 world, I have an ENS address, seancrow.eth, right? So I could have a DID. I will have a DID at some point, a decentralized identifier that shows I own seancrow.eth. Now that DID is basically represents. So I think what I understand is that within that DID, it can basically point to all these things, my data backpack, all these things that I own, my verifiable credentials that people have given to that DID, right? So if I go to Yale University, Yale can say, DID seancrow.eth, you've graduated, here is your diploma. And that shows up in my data backpack. And I can choose to show that to whomever I would like.
Gotcha. And when you show that, they can prove that thing that you have, that diploma from Yale or Miami. I don't know. I keep on using Yale here. But when you have that, they can prove that, yes, this actually came from them because that body, that university has their own like signing or signature.
Yeah. So the basically if somebody is looking at my diploma, they can open it up and see, oh, Miami University. You basically open up this verifiable credential, and it says it's signed by this person who issued the verifiable credential, and it was issued to this person. And the way you see that is by there's DIDs, right? So the signing DID, you can go and look to see who owns that. And so Miami University, could attach that DID to their website, and I know exactly who that is.
Well, and the cool thing here is that you have these VCs, these verifiable credentials, can have expirations. They can't be tampered with. This basically, and if we think of it as an NFT, it could be transferred to someone else, but it'll always still point back to you.
They're non-transferable.
Oh, they're non-transferable?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you said that they could be transferred.
No. So verifiable credentials are non-transferable.
Gotcha. So you can't. It's just there or it's not.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought I read or
and
heard
this is a
like
huge. That. So let's talk about the differences between NFTs and VCs, verifiable credentials, and that's probably the biggest one is that they're non-transferable. There's things called soul-bound tokens that are non-transferable, but that's kind of a debate right now if those should exist. But so NFTs, they're on-chain, they're public, they're immutable. They don't offer any context to how they were acquired, right? So if there was a Miami University diploma NFT, I could go buy that from somebody.
Yep.
That proves nothing about me because I just bought it. I didn't go.
Or you could even transfer it from one wallet to another that you own, but there's no way to prove that you were the holder of both of those wallets, or you just did a side deal with someone to just give it to you. Yeah,
exactly. So that's why this concept of soul-bound tokens came about, is non-transferable NFTs. But there's a lot of problems with that because they're public, right? So Miami could issue me a non-transferable NFT, soul-bound token, that says it's my diploma. But if we allow that to happen, there's a lot of illegal and stupid things that can happen. Like what if they issue to the wrong address and they just gave a diploma to a wrong person?
Yep.
Or what if somebody issues a soul-bound token with, illicit content on it, and it's just stuck in my wallet forever? So there's some problems with that. So the verifiable credentials are the non-transferable off-chain version of that. That is private by default.
So I guess the other cool thing about VCs is that they require consent, so that if someone does send you illicit content, you can actually say, well, yes or no to that. And you can decide if you want to show said illicit content to someone or not, or you don't even have to have it with you, as opposed to then being in that trouble spot of, well, now it's stuck. It's stuck with me. Everyone can see that I have it. For me to get rid of it is going to leave a trail. For me to start anew means that I literally have to start anew, and I have none of that legacy kind of history of all the other transactions or all the other things that I've done to prove that, hey, I am actually a legitimate person that's done this X, Y, and Z, and I have that kind of record behind me, so to say.
Yeah, I just don't. After going through this, I don't really understand how soul-bound tokens will work in the real world. To me, this seems like the only way forward is an off-chain solution.
I think there's pros and cons, and learning this, I think there's more cons than there are pros, but there's also different
more cons to what?
With soul-bound tokens. And maybe it'd be good to have just an episode on soul-bound tokens versus VCs. Because
and I will add an asterisk to what I was saying. I would say I only see the way forward for off-chain solutions for personal information.
Yeah. Like I could see, and you can, depending on what the topic is, I could see someone coming at it from both sides, as in terms of they support or they don't support soul-bound tokens. Because let's say the government, so the original soul-bound token kind of example was the whole, a credit bureau gives you a credit score. And that's really cool. And it's kind of like stuck with you and says like, hey, this is great. But then the other, scenarios, spam, illicit content, all this other stuff, you just don't have like an option to it. But the other, thing could be, well, the government could mark you as like, hey, you've been convicted of a crime, for example. If you have the option to say yes or no to that, I think most people would probably opt to say no, because they don't want to give consent that they have this. And maybe that's a good thing in some situations, but maybe it's a bad thing in others because you don't have that like track record. And so I think that there's so many different edge cases we can come up with where they're either good or bad, depending on like what it is. That, yeah, like we could have like a long discussion on that. And I think Vitalik has got to be thinking of this stuff because he recognizes that, like, as things, and Evan pointed this out too, as it becomes cheaper and easier to mint NFTs or soulbound like NFTs or tokens, whatever, like we will introduce spam and we will introduce bad actors to the space, because that's exactly what happened to the internet at the early days.
Always happens.
Yeah. They always get you, marketers.
Yeah. But yeah, I think there's Evan's really focused on, the founder of Disco is really focused on inclusivity and making sure that underrepresented groups aren't being isolated in Web3. And I think soulbound tokens, like she argues that soulbound tokens can be really dangerous for them, because you can, like, if you're given a diploma from a certain university, or like, I don't know, some information that you can like assume data, like assume what that means. So like in Web3, you're pretty anonymous. There's not a name, there's not a profile picture, there's no information about you. But if you have all these things that you had no choice to, that are showing up in your wallet, a credit bureau could assume a lot of things about you based on a diploma or or whatever, that, maybe you went to an all black school and you got a diploma from there. Now all of a sudden, in an anonymous, supposedly anonymous environment, a Web3 credit bureau can assume with 90% certainty that you're a person of color. And that's like a huge problem that shouldn't be part of a world that we're promising anonymity and anonymity. I can't say that word.
Yeah. Now, I know what you're trying to say. I can see it. I can see it both ways there. Yes, I agree that you can get, if people want to, I think if people want to make decisions or statistics or computations or whatever the people in insurance is called, actuaries, I think, or it's just like data science right here. If you want to segment a group of people, whatever that might be, whether that might be like race, religion, or like tendencies and stereotypes, you probably can do that regardless of what data you have, just because they're already doing that with all the de-identified information. And so it kind of begs the question, well, yes, this solves one, but will we ever be truly anonymous in an anonymous environment when we still need to have some record of transaction? And if we have any transactions, can we still deduce information from that? And like, I don't know if it's safe to say no, like you'll never have that, because everything will be public. So there will be a way to get back to you to some regards. But to your point of, yes, like will at least making it off chain prevent that, or at least be more resistant to it. I agree. Yes, I think it will.
And like you said, some other properties of verifiable credentials, we got proof of attendance. So it's your typical POAP NFT. So you go to a conference, they can issue a VC verifiable credential that says, hey, you showed up here. They're non-transferable, they're non-sellable. You can set them to expire. So driver's license, maybe,
driver's license,
expiration date.
Doctors with renewable education credits.
vaccines, like, whatever those vaccines you get every 7 years or something.
Yeah. Oh, like tetanus. Is that the one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just had to look that up actually recently. It was very difficult, but I finally got it. Yeah. The information, at least I got it.
Yeah. Finally got the vaccine.
No, I got 2 or 3 more years until I need to redo it again. But when I crashed in the dirt, I got that infection. I got concerned. I was like, what if it is tetanus? Like, I'm screwed. So, but it wasn't.
And then the last two, they're free to create and they're independently verifiable.
Yep. I like that. And she also said, and looking up on Disco too, that these VCs are tamper evident. I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means?
I thought I've heard her say tamper proof.
Or tamper proof, tamper evident. Like just
I don't know what evident means.
I guess evidence that you did try to tamper with it, maybe. I don't know what that means.
That would make sense.
I don't know how they can make that tamper proof, but maybe.
I know they're cryptographically signed, so it does involve cryptography, even though it's not on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know the technical specifics of how they work.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like we can protect and encrypt all this information, and it can be, resistant against quantum computers and ridiculous, future, like 50 years from now, it'll be, fine, or like it might be crackable. We can do all these things, but if the user input screws something up on the front end, we're still screwed, because that's literally exactly the same way that they hacked Uber most recently. Was just they just were pinging a contractor over and over again to just send that like verification code. And finally did. And then he just screwed the pooch on the whole thing, which is kind of funny. And then the same thing that happened with Twitter too before. It was just something so simple and silly that they were able. And so we can do all these things to protect on one end, but we might not if someone malicious finds a way to kind of get into the back end or like impersonate someone at that point. Mm-hmm. But cryptographically, I think impersonation is the thing that we're really protecting against here, which is the main. Then the rest we got to put into the faith of humanity, which is pretty scary too. But at least this gives us a lot of assurances on the front end.
I mean, even with Web3 and blockchain, like, I have a private key written down on a piece of paper. Someone can come into my, find this piece of paper wherever I've hid it in the world, steal it, and then they have access to all of my crypto. That seems pretty not secure.
Yep.
But this is the literal security of blockchain.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, it's probably more secure than a bank account or a safety deposit box where someone can go into there always, versus this limits the number of possibilities of how this gets
and I guess
out.
It's like a password to my bank account. Like, it's the same shit,
Yeah. Like if someone gets your Apple ID and figures, like if someone has your phone and knows your password to get in, like you lose a lot of things immediately. Yeah. And there's it's just like, what do you do? So, so that's interesting.
One of the examples that there's a few really good examples of like, okay, we have this technology. What can it be used for? I really like the DAO example. So let's say you're a member of a DAO and you perform some sort of work. Let's just say it's, I don't know, like graphic design work. Mm-hmm. And then you go to another DAO and you want to do graphic design work, but they don't know anything about you. They don't know if you're good. They don't know if you've done any work before. There's no way to trustlessly prove that you did great work at another DAO. So basically you just have a fresh start and you just have to earn your trust again.
As an anonymous too, staying anonymous.
Yeah, if you want to, but trustlessly meaning that you just know that you're good without having to trust someone saying they're good, right? Mm-hmm. So with Disco, theoretically, you could do some work at a DAO and they could issue you some sort of verifiable credential that proves that says, hey, you did this thing. You've earned this reputation. Yep. And then you go to another DAO and you say, hey, look at my reputation that I've chosen to show you in my backpack. I've said you can look at this, and maybe you have other work that you've done at other companies or other DAOs. I think that's pretty cool.
So if we wanted to take that and put it into a Web 2 example and kind of modify that, the way I understood what you just said is that I can work at a company. Let's say the company is the DAO. So I can work at a company for 5 years, and I can have a bunch of projects that I've put on my LinkedIn from that company, and maybe a recommendation or two from that company as well as on my LinkedIn profile. But I also worked at a couple other companies before that. I maybe had something in between. Maybe I went on a sabbatical and just like didn't work for 2 years. But instead of someone going to my LinkedIn profile and seeing all that information, I now get to decide, being like, hey, would you hire me? By the way, here are my credentials, and this is what I did with this one company here, and this is all that stuff. But they don't need to see my sabbatical. They don't need to see my other work history. They don't need to see anything else. And they can
trust it, right?
And they can trust it.
Because they can open up, if they really wanted to, they can verify that every one of those VCs are signed by the companies you say that issued them to you.
So
right? Because right now...
gaslighting or making up stuff.
Like right now, like we've got a portfolio of projects on our website. Like we're the only ones saying that we did those, right? Yep. Everyone looking at our website just trusts the fact that we did them. But if we had those in this data backpack, and you could open up that verifiable credential and say, oh, like that company signed that with their cryptographic keys, that's proof that they gave it to us. So we couldn't spoof that. We couldn't fake that. So it's basically like Clutch.co for us in our world.
Yep.
Because we're trusting Clutch, and our clients are trusting Clutch that our testimonials are real. In this case,
And the DID or the address is that Clutch reaches out to someone with said email address domain.
Yep.
But if there was a way to like spoof that domain, which like maybe there is, maybe it's not, but they like, and the phone number, they don't really probably check and all this other stuff, but there's ways that it can break down a whole lot easier in our current world right now in state versus VCs and DIDs and Disco.
Yep. Yeah. So I think like a big part of verifiable credentials, at least what they're focusing on now, is this. It's an annoying term, but she calls them proofs of work. And I hate it because for the longest time, I thought she was talking about proof of work. But then I realized she was saying proofs of work. It's literally then like you proving that you did some sort of work.
Yep. So you thought of like the whole ether, like how the blockchain works.
I thought she was talking about like proof of work, and I was like, what does this have to do with this?
So my mind went there second, but the first place my mind went to was math proofs. And like when we were still in college and just having to show my work, I was like, oh, I hate this. Like this is so difficult and confusing. So same thing, same concept. But
the one piece on trust that I was trying to figure out here was, so I think the example they use is this diploma thing. So it's, okay, I've got this diploma that's a verifiable credential. And I go apply for a job, and they, are checking my education history and want to make sure that I went to the university that I said I went to. How do they trust that the diploma they're looking at came from Miami University? And I thought it was really cool that they can see who issued that verifiable credential to me with the signing address. And the way that they can connect that address, because it's still just a string of random things, right? How do they know that that's actually Miami? And the way that they know that is because Miami can attach their decentralized identifier document to any public identifier. And in this case, they can add it as a DNS record to their website.
Yep.
So just like you add, so they can add just like a text file, or that's how you set up emails or whatever. So you can add a DID doc to their DNS. And
I heard that, but only now when you said that did it click.
Yeah. So when the employer is verifying it, they can say, okay, I trust miami.edu
Yep.
because that's an .edu address, and that is
And I
attached
know
to, and I know that
miami.edu is
attached to this
or
did.
actually it's miamioh.edu,
Yeah,
but
W.
yeah.
And it's attached
Let's
to
not
this
get into
did.
it. Yeah.
And then that did issued my diploma.
Yep. So if anybody isn't familiar with this, in the marketing or analytics term, the same exact thing right now happens with Google Analytics. When you want analytics on your own website, you need to be able to prove to Google that you're gathering information on this website, and you also have to embed some stuff. Say again?
That you own the website.
Yes, that you own the website. And so in the DNS settings of that website, you need to put either a text file or either in the header or something that proves that you would not be able to do this unless you really did own it.
And it creates this handshake between your website and Google Analytics. And it says, we agree, I own this and you can use this. And so that's what they're accomplishing here is it's a handshake between this public address, which is a website, and the verifiable credential and the DID. It's basically saying I am who I say I am.
Yep. And I guess you could say, well, how do you know that's going to be real for sure? Or you're basing this entire security and this authenticity on just like a website address. For anybody to think that isn't a realistic solution, I feel like everything we do nowadays is based on just that. It would be analogous to a mailing address too. You can move or you can keep the same, but like there's ways to prove that that's been moving and so forth. And I'm sure they'll figure that out as well. But.
Yeah. And she also said that you can attach this DID document to any public identifier like Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, which maybe that's like not implemented yet, but if it is, I don't understand how that works.
Do you think that would, like when you say that, I think that there would be a setting within LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter that says like, hey, if you have a DID, just like if you have a URL website, like you can just paste it in here.
That's got to be how it's implemented. Probably. Which, now that DIDs are a real standard by W3C, that's a real possible thing that can happen. Yep. I agree. Yeah. So, and maybe they already do, and I just don't know. But in theory, let's say Twitter in your settings says, okay, put your DID in here, and you can put your decentralized identifier. And now your Twitter profile, so whatever you're at, Sean Crow 5, publicly is attached to this DID. So when if I issued one of our employees a verifiable credential that said they did this work, and it's attached to my Twitter address publicly, people can trust that that's real.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So the cool thing that this does is these DIDs and VCs and so forth are funny because we talk about how they're going to, like the Web3 world is going to abolish Web2, but I really don't. But like the more we do research, the more we learn about this stuff. I don't think Web 2 is going to go away, or there's going to be still many use cases for Web 2. And this is one of those where it serves almost as a bridge or kind of link between the two, because it'd be almost silly for us to just destroy everything we did before and start anew. This is just, we're building anew, learning from our previous mistakes and the things that didn't work, leveraging a lot of the stuff that already works. And maybe eventually it'll be replaced and completely abolished just because it'll be useless. But that'll probably be 20, 30 years down the road at the earliest.
That's probably the only negative to the Web3, the brand of Web3, is that you might assume that means Web2 is going to go away. But like you said, even in 30 years, Web 2 is going to exist. We're still going to have apps on our phone. Not everything's going to be blockchain. So I agree.
Well, it'll take 30 years for the government to realize that maybe they should be on Web 3.
Yeah.
So we'll have
maybe
the equivalent to websites on Web 3 by that time.
Maybe we'll actually have a voting system that they can utilize blockchain for.
I don't know if it'll be voting. It'd be cool though. But it would be It would be so nice. What could be cool is that if you did all your financial transactions within the Web3 ecosystem, there's a proof. Imagine how simple taxes could be at that point. That would be entirely programmatic. So now we're getting a little bit off topic here. So going back to Disco. So one of the things that was said is that Disco allows you to leverage things like Lens, which we've already talked about, or even, DSO, and to make profiles even more rich. And I thought that was cool because all of a sudden someone has the ability to take from their data backpack and say, hey, I actually want to post all these things or some of these things, or make private some of these things to certain groups that I'm a part of, onto these profiles that I already have within these like social networks. So I thought that was pretty cool too.
How does that work? I didn't stumble on that. So like with Lens, for example, all of your posts are public and on chain. How would your data backpack interact with that here?
So I think this might be, and I'm no expert, but I think it'd be more so like the profile. So you, Sean, posted something. Sean, can also include on my profile that I went to Miami University. And I can also prove that I really like wine because I've drank all these wines, but I'm only going to show these VCs or these badges or these wine club memberships to the wine club ecosystem or to only my followers that are on there. That's the way that I understood it. Do you think that's right?
So basically you set up your Lens profile, and in the settings there during the setup, it would be reading my data backpack, and I basically say I consent to give this information, this information, this information, and that's it. And then that would show up in my lens profile.
Yep. Or you might even be able to monetize it to say like, hey, only people that actually pay to follow me or something can see these extra things. I don't know if content is the right way to think about it, but I think if we think about this being some sort of like private content that I want to share, I can choose to do what I want with that. Maybe. I don't know if that's a good or bad parallel, but kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I wonder if like where this ends, like, is it just little data snippets, or I don't think you could build a Lens type thing solely on Disco. I don't think that makes sense, because everything's private by default, so that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, no, because this is your stuff. So I don't think what's in your backpack is a post.
I
don't think it would be like, hey, like I'm following you. That's a private. I think that it's like more public. But the cool analogy of this whole data backpack was neat, and I guess this is circling back a little bit. Right now, what's public on the blockchain is your financial history and transactions. And so Evan was talking about how this is just like everybody's just an account, and I just see how much money you have or how little money you have. And
right now in Web3, all I can share like Sean.crow at ETH. Every single person can go see how much money's in there and what NFTs that I own.
Yep. Yeah. And that's it. And you have no more information to that. And so this kind of breaks down that, so that when you join, I guess we should have talked about this when we're talking about the DAOs, going from one DAO to the next. So when I do go to the next DAO, not only can I prove that I have very little money in my address, but also, and made very poor decisions in terms of investing things, but I can also prove that I've done really good work in here or another spot. There's something that kept on popping up in multiple videos. They were called primitives. I tried coming up with some research on how to define that or what that is. Did you, by chance?
So you and I have actually talked about this before, and from what I understand, it's like this Web3 term. I had not heard this term until Web3, but basically the way I understand it is that when these new technologies are built, there's things that they call primitives. So when we were talking about Lens protocol, the primitives for Lens are the profile NFT, the post NFT, and it's like the basic components of this technology. That's how I understand it.
Primitives of Disco are the VCs and the DIDs.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
That's cool. How I would describe it.
If we aren't getting that right, then that's terrible. But hopefully we are. What else do I have here? I thought it was cool that there's no gas fees, and this is totally free too.
Free to create, Disco. No gas fees.
Because this isn't on chain. Like that's the whole reason. Can
create them with the speed of an API.
Yeah. And the amount of electricity and power and energy that it actually takes to do this is merely whatever it takes to power the device that you're actually on. Mm-hmm. And to verify, it takes whatever time and effort that it is to basically visit a website, like it's just there. So it's very elegant.
Yeah. One of the examples that she was talking about was if you're in an Uber and, you're given 5 stars or whatever. And so over time you develop this Uber score. Mm-hmm. In a world with Disco, that Uber score would be in my backpack.
Yep.
And in this world, I could then go to Lyft. And so like without Disco, I go to Lyft and I have to start over. I have to get a new rider rating every time, right? Totally separate systems. But in a world with Disco, I can go to Lyft and say, hey, I've got this awesome rating over the last 5 years on Uber. You can check it out, which I think is cool. But why would Lyft trust the ratings that Uber gave me?
That's
what I don't understand.
Well,
like, what if their algorithm sucks and Lyft's like, no, we don't recognize that?
Well, but that's just assuming that this is the first time that you're interacting between Lyft and Uber.
Yeah, totally.
Like if Lyft, let's just hypothetically say that you have been an avid Lyft user or Uber user because you worked for Uber, and you never took a Lyft because you didn't like them. But all of a sudden you go to a market where there's really no Ubers and there's only Lyfts.
Exactly.
But you were an avid, let's say you had 5,000 trips and your score was a 4.99. If you went to Lyft and Lyft was like, yeah, if you've had that many trips and so forth, they were familiar enough as to this matches with that. They could give you some sort of benefit. The same way that if you're a wine club member and somewhere prestigious, and another wine club, and you discover a new wine club, they can say, hey, yeah, I guess that's good. My favorite example of what Evan actually mentioned with regards to this was from a credit perspective. She gave the example, and I thought it was genius. If you're an American living in America right now, there's 3 different credit agencies, credit bureaus. If you want to become an expat and all of a sudden move to France or another country, you have nothing. And there's no way to prove that. But if you want to get a loan out in, let's say, Poland or France or something like that, all of a sudden you can have this information that you can prove and kind of share. And at least it gives you some sort of chance that this is legitimate and makes it so much easier as opposed to just never that being overly complicated. It's still probably going to be complicated for a really long time, but it might make it at least a little bit easier.
So what I don't get is what's the difference between that and today? So let's say this score goes into my data backpack. I guess the difference is that they can prove it's verifiable that this credit bureau signed that credential. I guess that's the big unlock in this situation versus me just giving a piece of paper that says I got this score.
How many times? Okay, maybe not in your scenario, but in my scenario, I have many a times seen where you need a notary. You need to have something notarized that's been properly translated or something, and that it's really come from this source. And you need that single document, whether that's for a birth certificate or something. Imagine if you like, I want to get Polish citizenship too. I need to get this information from my parents. I need to get like the legit documents and all this other crap. Bring it on over and then prove this. I cannot do that in a non-physical almost way versus this would enable me to just digitally be like, yeah, boom, boom, boom. I have all the check boxes checked, you know?
Yep.
Making government more efficient. What a dream.
It's going to be a long time until Disco gets that far.
This is what we said, 20 or 30 years. You know?
I liked her dream of in 10 years. The dream is that in 10 years, you could be invited to a rave in the Louvre in Paris. And all you need to do is grab your suit, your dress, and you have your Disco profile. You walk through security at the airport. You walk through security at the Louvre. You get on a plane. You get into the party, and you don't have to do anything because, and you choose what you want to show up with from your backpack. I thought that was a cool dream. Is they literally want this to infiltrate every part of our life, to take this data with us wherever we go. Data backpack is such a good analogy. It's genius.
I love the data backpack.
Genius marketing.
You know what? This funny thing is that I think kids in 5 or 10 years, or like the kids that will be born in 5 or 10 years, will have no idea what a backpack actually is.
Yeah, they will.
It'll be the same thing as the save icon, and it's a 3D printed floppy disk. You know, that's what they think, or the floppy disks is. They just like what will they really be bringing? The computers will be so cheap; they'll just be everywhere. So the cool thing, and this is the cool thing about the whole NFT things as well, and the POAPs and so forth, is that this ability to prove things. And so one of them was like to prove that you were an early fan, or that you've listened to every single one of Taylor Swift's songs 1,000 times and you know the words to every single song. And so then you have these like it's cool because there's so many more like avenues and possibilities that were previously almost impossible to make.
Yeah, because Spotify does that year in review or whatever they call it. And you know, some of our friends are huge T-Swift fans, and like you said, if they listen 1,000 times a month, or they're in the top 0.1% of listeners, Spotify could issue a verifiable credential that says this is true. Like, this person listened to this band in the top 0.1%. And so all of a sudden that's part of your data backpack, and you can take that anywhere, not just within Spotify. So I think that's cool that you could go to a Taylor Swift concert, and now all of a sudden she knows trustlessly that you are the top 1% of her fans, and they can unlock an insane experience for you.
And the cool thing is that Taylor Swift doesn't need to be the only person that can actually unlock that. That can be a bar.
Anybody.
Anywhere that just says, hey, like, if you happen to be in this category of just like a crazy music fan for these 3 artists, like, come on over, or just like any artist. And it'll be interesting, the different ways that kind of comes up. She talked about schemas too. Did you get to that point?
A little bit. And I think that was just the schema of what DIDs are. I don't think I have it pulled up here. But it was basically that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for like a schema, is think of it as essentially if you have a profile, each kind of like identifier, or like what's your name, your age, your address, all these other things, that would be kind of part of a schema. And so the idea was that there will be universal schemas for, let's say, universities and educational type credentials, so that everybody can kind of follow the same format. So then we also don't end up with 100 different ways to actually use this stuff, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah. And where I came across that word here is there's 4 main components of a DID. There's the unique identifier, which could be your wallet address or an email address or a URL.
Yep.
And then there's the did method, which is a string of text in front of that unique identifier that lets any software that is interacting with your did know what's going on. The third is the scheme, and it's literally just the letters DID that are stuck in front of that identifier. And then the fourth is a did document that we talked about, which is basically the three pieces that above that I just talked about all come together to form an identifier that allows a system that you're interacting with to resolve itself into a did document. And that can contain a bunch of other information about you that you can control. You can think of a did document as a personal manual and directory that helps others interact with your did.
Yep. So, I don't know if you picked this up, but Disco's, do you know what Disco is? Their DBA, doing business as. Did you catch what their original name is?
No.
Probably Nothing Inc. I loved it. Questions that I have, and this is like a two-part question here, but no, let's just go to one. Where is the money behind this? Where does Disco actually make this money? Because they need to make money somehow, and there's 0% transparency as to like how they make money.
That's a good question. I have no idea how they make money. Did you find anything?
I found nothing. I was just they didn't mention open source. So they've got, how do they make money? Are they going to make money on like licensing these DIDs or like having these, but then they're going to create barriers to entry? I don't know how they make money. So that's an issue. And she never mentioned this in any of the things, or maybe I just missed them all. I watched a lot of interviews too. Evan talking about Disco. The other thing is, does this not centralize things somehow again?
That's the biggest, I guess, argument against DIDs in general, not necessarily just Disco, is that the decentralization maxis, will say, oh, this isn't on chain. This isn't okay. Everything needs to be on chain. But I think I'm in the club that not everything needs to be on chain, and I don't think it's a big deal.
But so what? So I agree with that as long as it's decentralized to a point, because what happens if Disco goes down? If Disco goes bankrupt because they forgot to make money along the way, since they didn't realize it themselves and no one answered the question, what if they go bankrupt? Like, where does this go? Because all of a sudden, all my data, all my VCs, all my stuff, does that just evaporate? Or like, where does it go? I guess I would be okay if, with this being centralized in quotes, if it really didn't matter for Disco.
So that's a good question. And I think the answer is that your verifiable credentials, I think you can store them anywhere you would like. I don't think they're stored on a Disco server. I think you can store those on a decentralized system. I think. So I think you could put those on IPFS if you'd like to.
There is one mention to the Ceramic network that they store things on Ceramic. So this is what kind of concerns me here, is that this stuff that we do with Disco doesn't work without Disco. Because let's hypothetically say that, they go under and I still own these, but if I can't do anything, it's just kind of like Parse. Remember that? Like, you use Parse, you could build everything you wanted. Parse went kaput because Facebook said no. And then you could host things yourself, kind of, but then it just kind of fluttered out and died. Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but I don't think that's how it works, actually. I don't think the VCs are all being stored on Disco. DIDs aren't stored on Disco. I think they're just enabling some of the tech behind it, but I don't think if they go down, all of our off-chain NFTs are gone. I don't think that's how this works.
Okay.
I think they're creating the APIs for, I could be wrong here, for systems to basically check those verifiable credentials. Like if I walk into a coffee shop, I think they're creating a technology that would enable them to access my data backpack.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess things that hopefully we would talk to Evan. I would love to talk to her.
Yeah.
I want to know how they make money. What role does Disco actually play here? Like, is this all dependent on Disco or not? Which is also the question of do DIDs centralize this, and what other DID kind of companies out there actually, or organizations like are behind it, or sorry, projects. If we talk to Evan, I really want to know, where's the money behind this? Like how are they making money? Like what's the business model? Does this centralize things somehow? And also understanding of like, if Disco goes away, what happens to this stuff?
Yeah, like what if I've built up this reputation over the past 5 years of professional work, and Disco goes under? What happens?
Yeah. Or can Disco not go under? But
Yeah.
if no one's running it or managing it, does the other stuff like matter?
I imagine it's a really simple answer, because when you create your data backpack, you connect your wallet. So like there's still a chain involved here.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's still closed beta, and I have not been able to get access yet. I did email them to see if I can get access in preparation for this show, but I didn't get it yet. So, but you do connect your wallet to create your data backpack. So there is some sort of on-chain technology being used here for something.
Yep.
To make it more confusing for people.
The other piece is like, well, what information does Disco have on you? Like, do they have information on you, or nothing at all? And also, what do they store? I really just want to know, like, what's their goal here besides all the feel good stuff and the good missions? Like, what's the business behind it? And then what control do they have?
Yeah, and looking at the docs too, it looks like their tech enables you to be able to issue credentials as well. So as an employer, we could go on here and issue a credential to one of our employees.
Yep.
So they're basically building the tech to enable us to do that.
I think one other... So Disco is cool. DIDs are cool. VCs are cool. Everything is cool, let's say. I wonder how long it's actually going to take, because for this to really work at scale, there's going to need to be so many players within this space. We're talking employers, universities. I mean, look how long it took for LinkedIn to get off the ground, to like be somewhat starting to be accepted now as like a standard. It's going to take a long time for any kind of industry. And it seems like they're really trying to target the music space a little bit more here than the others, but also education. Like for this to be wholesome and this like, and meta or metaverse, then they're going to need everyone to partake in it.
Well, I think they don't need everyone to partake, because it's like not that siloed, right? It's, to be successful, they just have to start in one little industry and it'll work. But then another industry can also start using DIDs and VCs and it'll work as well. So like she was saying in one of her interviews, is that this whatever governing body of universities got together and they're actually looking at verifiable credentials and DIDs. They're not working with Disco at all. But
that's cool.
They're very thoughtfully going through and figuring out what a diploma looks like as a verifiable credential using DIDs. And this is a thing that like the governing body of universities in the United States is considering, but this isn't Disco pushing that agenda. This is them using the open sourced standards that they foresee as being part of the future. And Disco just utilizes that technology as well, I think.
Yep. Yeah. I wonder what other kind of Disco competitors can actually help this all kind of work together. That would be an interesting question too, like on the competitor side, although I would like to know that, would be like, what do they need to really grow and blow up in a good way? Like, what's that catalyst going to be?
Yeah, I mean, they're still, like I said, still closed. So yeah, I wonder when they open the beta open, like what is going to be the big use case? Because that's probably what they're doing now, is just figuring out, okay, we're going to identify the one use case that's going to blow us up.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Cool. I don't know if I have anything else.
Can we just appreciate how cute Ava is sleeping behind me this whole time, using that pillow? Like, come on, look at this.
It's very cute. Also, you're doing this. You're doing this recording. You're very devoted to the Web3 world. Doing this on your birthday.
Oh yeah, today's my birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. We're recording on Sean's birthday.
Will you issue me a verifiable credential that says I'm 31?
I could, yeah. If I ever got access to Disco.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. I will be the signing body. I'll have it to document. Yeah.
Yes.
Very trustworthy, I promise. Actually, why don't we just have Ava sign it, Yeah. So.
Cool. Well, that's all I got too.
Cool. Okay. Well, this is good. Like it.